The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene and you are listening to me, Arlene, at Durian ASEAN, at our Durian Heat. So now we are with Dr. Denison Jayasooria. He's a Principal Research Fellow at KITA-UKM, and he has been partnering with Dr. Benjamin Quinones. He's not now with us, but we'll try to connect with him soon via Skype. Both of them are actually working on a very interesting project. I won't call it project, it's more like a framework in terms of creating this solidarity economy, especially in this region of Southeast Asia. So, Dr. Denison, welcome to the studio.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation.
So, perhaps a bit of background sharing about what is solidarity economy. The word solidarity itself is quite controversial. Right?
Sure. I think the term solidarity economy, or others have used the term social economy, or interchangeably social enterprise. Others have used social entrepreneurship. These are all approaches to the alternative, dominant, market-driven business model. So I think a whole movement of people globally have emerged. And there are the older movements and the new movements that are there, and they are prevalent in ASEAN as well. That means it is individuals, groups, and communities that are doing business differently with a social objective, which is moving beyond CSR, much closer to cooperatives, fair trade, microcredit.
So it's not just a component of the company, but it's the whole concept itself.
The whole concept in which, and I think when Dr. Ben Quinones comes online, he would be able to repeat it. There are the three key pointers which are related to people at the center of development, people at the center of business, people at the center of society as a whole. People are important in their development, justice and fairness. Second is actually profits. Profits are equally important. It's profits not in terms of the end of everything or maximization or unscrupulous profits, but profits for sustainability, profits for investment, profits to ensure wealth is created, but it's not exploitative profits. And thirdly, it's for sustainability of the environment. So people, profits and planet are central to this. But Dr. Ben Quinones in developing this framework added two more. The fourth is values. Values are important. It's part of our religious and cultural heritage, values towards honesty, integrity, compassion, justice, these sort of values that are important in human relationships and foundation for society. And finally, governance. Governance in the sense that are the profits shared? Are they accountable to the people? Is there people's participation in the governance process, whether it is at the public or even private level? So it's calling for greater engagement with the communities at the bottom, whether they are the urban poor or whether they are rural or indigenous poor communities that are being impacted by the fast growth-oriented economies of the world.
So for you yourself, what personally, what makes you interested to go deeper in this idea of solidarity economy? Because I think when we talk about community-based economy, people often think about the leftist idea of trying to bring economic empowerment towards the community. But for you yourself, how do you see
I
this?
think because my basic involvement in society has been from a social work, a social practitioner, So largely the voluntary sector has been grant driven. We have largely been charitable or compassionate. We tend to give. That has resulted in a dependency syndrome, even to the clients or to the groups that we are working with, as well as the organizations, that a more sustainable business model seems necessary, and so that's one reason why, from a social work point of view. The other is from a human rights point of view, because then there needs to be economic justice and fairness in the distribution of resources, like indigenous people's lands are being taken, or their forests, or their customary lands, and then the equitable sharing is not there of what was historically or culturally belonging to them, and so a more fairer system. And so we see in the current economic models, which is focused on growth, equitable distribution and the rise of inequalities. By this, I'm not against market-driven forces. I think it's looking to see.
Perhaps trying to rediscover alternative means
yes,
of
and there are people out there who are actually doing it on the ground. Whether it was the traditional cooperatives that ensured that there was a fairer distribution, or whether it is the fair trades movement, where goods are sold, produced, sold in a more just, equitable manner, or whether even microcredit was extended to groups that were seen unbankable, and the social business movement or social enterprise movement that moves the private sector or the big business initiative from just a CSR to community empowerment and enabling local communities create wealth and distribute it in a more fair and just way.
Before we go deeper into the topic of solidarity economy, especially in the region of Southeast Asia, just a bit of a mention of an event that will be happening late this month in April. Perhaps you can share with us the pre-ASEAN Summit roundtable discussion on social solidarity economy.
Yes. I think just before the event, I think the term solidarity here is being used in building a cohesive local-based community, which then means community economy or wealth is being shared. So solidarity is used within that context.
We need to put a definition on it first.
Yeah, and people have used all kinds of terminology, but what we are saying, it's a more equitable distribution, and even public policies have focused on growth and distribution as a key focus. Now, this event on April the 25th is a pre-ASEAN Summit roundtable discussion on community-based enterprises, where we are seeking to bring our partners, the civil society, from the 10 ASEAN countries, as well as representatives of government agencies from the 10 countries together to explore models, approaches, initiatives that are fostering this in a more holistic and equitable way. So it's on poverty eradication, it's addressing inequality, it's in developmental justice. So what are the initiatives and models out there? Let's say in Indonesia, where there are rural banks, community-based banks, in the Philippines, in Myanmar,
but
in
we have
Cambodia,
it in Malaysia as well.
In Malaysia as well, because you have big projects and you've got small projects, and you have organizations at a regional level that are addressing it. For example, I visited a project with one of our partners who comes from Japan, ASEC in Japan, partners at rural kampong. Actually, it's a semi-urban kampong in Nibong Tebal called Kampong Aceh, which is a fishing village And the main project here is the growing of mangrove swarms. So what has this got, the planting of mangrove, got to do with economy and the community? Because the fishermen's livelihood, because they are smaller boats that they are using, they can't compete with the bigger boats. So they are fishing closer to the shore, and they need the mangrove swarms for their crabs, their prawns, the smaller fishes, and so they have been planting with the support of some private sector companies. But this ASEC, which is a Japanese based company, has been financing as well as building competencies, and that's a community based project. And so while the planting is there, fishing is improving, but at the same time the women there are taking the fruits from the mangrove plant and making jam out of it. And there are also certain species of the leaves which can be actually done up as leaves for tea. And they are also doing, it's a kind of a rise of a cottage industry. This is just one village doing it as a community-based project, but there are bigger programs here, like the farmers market, what Amana Ikhtiar does, the cooperative movements are doing in Malaysia and in other parts of ASEAN as well.
Let's go back to the date itself.
Yes.
When exactly is the roundtable discussion, and is it open to people to be part of this, especially those who are part of the industry itself?
Yeah. Now, the roundtable discussion is being held on April the 25th. It's a Saturday, and April 25th is being hosted at the office or the conference room of the Global Movement of Moderates. And so that's the key spot in which we are having, and this is a collaborative effort with ASEC, which is the Asian Solidarity Economy Council, Global Movement of Moderates, ASLI, Bina Swadaya Foundation, and Synergy Foundation of Indonesia, together with the Institute of Ethnic Studies at UKM. So it's a number of partners coming together to facilitate this. We have extended invitation to all the 10 ASEAN countries. We have also extended invitation to our partners around. So there's no charge to registration. We have asked different people to participate in the discussion, to assist in the case study development. And we have a specific outcome, which is to be a joint project in the South-South triangular cooperation model, and I can explain that afterward. But the event itself is open, and we would encourage...
you want more youth participation?
Yes, youth.
For so long, when it comes to your younger generation, of course, they look for this kind of white-collar, aircon, office type of job. But in reality, they can always contribute more towards being part of this solidarity economic movement.
Yes, I would think so. In Malaysia now, with what the Ministry of Youth and Sports in a recent social entrepreneurship summit that they hosted, likewise, I think trying to open up imagination of young people to be far more innovative. Actually, with the roundtable discussion, our team of about 7 or 8 of us are also participating at the ASEAN People's Forum, and we are running 2 workshops during the ASEAN People's Forum on the 23rd of April. And so that's another slot that people from around ASEAN and even people from within Malaysia could come to our discussions to hear what is sustainable development goals and solidarity-based enterprise or solidarity economy in the context of conflict situations, because our partners in the Philippines are working in southern Philippines in the conflict area Other partners are working, let's say, in Jaffna, Sri Lanka. This is more in South Asia. And so even within conflict situations, community-based economies provide alternative models for women and children to participate in the economy of the country. So there will be case studies, there will be conceptual frameworks, and hopefully there is a lead to strengthening public policy in recognizing this initiative as mainstream rather than sideshow. But it's in line with ASEAN as a people's ASEAN, then a community-based ASEAN, neighborhoods, local communities participating across. So it'll be great to network, let's say Kampong Aceh in Nibong Tebal with another rural kampong in Cambodia or Myanmar, and they can interlink. So this people-to-people cooperation across ASEAN is important. Now ASEAN is more prime ministers, ministers, private sector, big companies that are actually capturing the potential of ASEAN. But ASEAN actually is people now. So rural communities, because of the lack of resources or connectivity, so we are not connecting one village to another. Okay, cities are connecting, prime ministers, presidents are connecting. But why don't we connect village leaders, project leaders from one village to another? And that, I think when that takes place, ASEAN will truly be ASEAN. If not, it's just a heads of state meeting.
You should be
with
part
very little impact on the ground.
You should be part of the advisory group for the ASEAN Secretary on that.
Hopefully they bring in the grassroots into that process.
Anyway, we'll take one short break. When we return, we will discuss more on the South-South cooperations as well as some interesting information regarding on the social solidarity economy.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene and you're listening to me at Durian ASEAN's The Durian Heat. And of course with Dr. Denison Jayasooria, we were earlier discussing about the social solidarity economy and also an event that will be happening soon, a roundtable discussion by end of April. So just to continue the discussion, first of all, you mentioned earlier this term called South-South and Triangular Cooperation, but what exactly it is?
Okay. I think there is already a system in place at the UN and regional levels, and Malaysia has been very active in the process of South-South cooperation. And here for social economy or community-based economy, we are proposing that in countries where the model of community-based and has been better developed, for example, in Malaysia, in the Philippines, in the Indonesia, these countries have large organizations that are well sustained and well coordinated, that we reach out to what one would call to 4 other ASEAN countries, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar and Vietnam, where we could assist through capacity building, exchange programs, training, transfer of technology, and also transfer of some best practices, and see a greater linkage. So that means at least at the spot, 7 of the 10 ASEAN countries would already be involved. And I'm sure we can pull in Thailand and Singapore. Singapore has some very good social enterprise models that have developed through the support.
But what does that South-South mean exactly?
The South-South here meaning that it is not just assistance coming from developed countries.
Yeah, but that's the popular idea, right?
Yeah, so normally it is the more developed countries assisting, but in the South-South cooperation, where UNDP and other agencies have been facilitating this, or even Malaysia's example of the Langkawi dialogues, where they have sought to build capacity at the South-South developing country, exchange of resources, even funding and sourcing of such funds and exchange of personnel. So we are hoping that Malaysians, Indonesians and Filipino leaders from civil society could actually move on with their organizations to partner in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar and Vietnam. And we are hoping on the 25th when we discuss with government representatives and the civil society leaders, including those from private sector, that we could facilitate this network in a far more effective way.
Is it why it is called also as a triangle
Yeah,
cooperation?
a triangular is
Triangular,
a term that they have used, and we are just borrowing on that term. But we have partners like ILO who have confirmed participating, and they have provided some of the funding for flights of participants from a number of these countries. We have UNDP Malaysia participating to share of their South-South cooperation program. We have WFTO, World Fair Trade Organization Asia, that's also confirmed. So some regional bodies are coming in with national organizations and both government, civil society coming in for this discussion, and hopefully we can take it to the next level with some funding, either through the big companies in ASEAN or development funding. We have ASEC, which is funded through Japanese development aid. They are also participating because ASEC from Japan has projects in East Timor, in Malaysia, and in a number of countries around Sri Lanka, Palestine. So they have the expertise of cross-cultural and Japanese volunteers and resource persons moving across in a more holistic and integrated way.
Funding is always a huge issue when it comes to any project, and not just when it comes to grassroots level. But how do you manage to get long-term funding? Because when it comes to funding, usually companies, especially big corporations, even in terms of development agency, they see it as a mere CSR projects, or it's only for the short-term sort of assistance. But what kind of funding you're looking at? Is it more of a short-term assistance, or so that later on either the farmers or those who are in this business can provide for themselves? Or are you looking for a long-term one where they constantly work together to achieve a certain goal?
I think the sources of funding are diverse, multiple sources of funding. One key source through community base is actually the community sources, saving, mobilization of the poor. Don't ever underestimate the poor, because they too have resources in the way that it can be mobilized, like through the cooperative movement or their own savings. It might be small, but it eventually builds up. Alongside that, now we have what is called social investors, largely from Europe and other parts, and ethical financing. These are groups that are beginning to look at more sustainable, community-based sort of funding sources.
So it's moved beyond just CSR.
Yes, it's not relying on CSR actually.
And they call it investments. So
they call it investments because either they are looking for the return of the principal sum or investment of not losing the investment sum. Because in the charitable model, it's a give and it's gone, So it's seen as an investment, and you have to generate wealth through the investment. And so it's not a handout, it's not a charity, but people would pay for that fund and to sustain it, as well as through development sources. I mentioned the Japanese organization that gets its fund through Japanese government sources. There are also Korean sources that's looking for community-based projects across Asia that they have raised funds, a civil society in Korea raising funds through their government's development aid. Then we can look at CSR funding of our big AirAsia or CIMB, Maybank, these sort of big players
but
within.
Even that, you are trying to somehow give the message to these companies that it should be in a form of investment, not CSR.
Yes, and it's partnering with the community, building their capacity, enhancing it. So like some of the funding, like let's say mangrove planting, then the funds will go towards that. But the net return will have an impact in wealth creation or rejuvenation of the environment.
Is there any example of private companies in Southeast Asia that has shifted from merely, seeing this kind of solidarity economy as a form of charity or CSR to going on a higher level of investing in this economy and seeing this on a bigger scale?
I think there have emerged models, like in the Malaysian context itself. I think Khazanah's Yayasan Sejahtera has really moved into more long-term sustainable development of ground projects. It might be small, but in both the Indonesian and Filipino models, small civil society that started off as lending credit have become banks. They have become commercial shops. But the profits are not drawn for individuals, but the profits are drawn for the community and the broader aspect. And so I think this is still fresh in some areas, but the potential is enormous, and one would now need to be a catalyst to motivate. And of course, the big player around the world now is Professor Yunus and his social business model, social enterprise model, and they are looking into funds that they have raised, and they want to invest into sustainable development projects that impact the community, environment, people, generating. So I think if CSR projects can move from simple handout into more sustainable programs of local community, like indigenous people. Now we have complaints from indigenous people all over ASEAN and Asia that the timber companies are impacting their traditional livelihoods and things. But if they adopt a more environment and people-friendly in the sustainable development model, it's a win-win situation for both sides. So you get the sustainable forests, you get wealth created through timber, but it's sustained. Profits might be lower than, indiscriminate sort of extraction of resources. But I think this is where we'll have to pay the price for future use as well.
But also, looking at the long term is profit for the long term, not profit for the short term.
Yes.
Because once the forest is gone, that means it's gone forever, and to wait for another batch of a new forest to grow will be probably another decades or even hundreds of years.
Yes. I think this is where public policy at the ASEAN level that impacts management of natural resources, management of capital flows, management of workers, whether it's being exploited. It's within the context of also migrant labor movement. So it becomes public policies that are more friendly, moving from exploitative economy to more people-friendly and sustainable. You don't want Myanmar workers coming here or Vietnamese workers here feeling that they are badly treated. No. You don't want that feeling. You're not going to build ASEAN where there is, brotherly or family relationship. So we have to shift from very nation-centric point of view. This might be an ideal and a vision, but we have to move from that to recognizing the peoples of ASEAN, the multi-ethnic, multi-religious, as our people. No? So whether it is Myanmaris, Vietnamese, Malays, Chinese, Indian, you're seeing it as our people and would be concerned for them and their families. And I think that's the vision of a solidarity economy.
So, I mean, you've been engaging with them for quite some time. Do you think there's a shift of mindset as a whole in the ASEAN office or ASEAN Secretariat?
I think the themes that we are talking of has because it's appearing in some statements like sustainable development, social entrepreneurship has come in, collective forms like cooperatives. There is a shift towards that, but the dominant model still is the excessive market flow and control. That's the dominant model. But I think this is where if public policy in line with the post-millennium development goals agenda can bring this in. This is the theme that civil society in the ASEAN People's Forum for development justice, economic justice, human rights and participation of the grassroots are all interrelated, that wealth is not just the purview or in the domain of the rich and powerful, because inequalities are very wide in ASEAN as a whole, between people to people, between country to country, between rich ASEAN and the poorer ASEAN. And so some more initiatives I think need to be supported. And there are ground examples, whether they are farmers doing things together, producing milk, whether it is cottage industries. So how then do you sell them across ASEAN in terms of products, clothes that are community-based, that then should have some sort of tax benefits cutting across handicraft, these sort of things, so that the people's economy can emerge. But if ASEAN is moving and not allowing only the multinational big players within ASEAN or the global players to dominate the scene, but smaller people, like let's say this group in Kampong Aceh doing their jam. Now, how would that jam of mangrove swamp jam be able to compete with other big brands?
That's true.
But if there is public policy, like how Malaysian government supported Pasar Tani, got the farmers out straight, cutting the middleman into retail, how do we enable the informal sector within ASEAN countries to have a bigger say? Because this is where we will move the poor up from dependent poor to income generating poor. So they are self-employed and they might be part of communities. Of course, Malaysia has less of a rural in the peninsula, but Sabah Sarawak is very much still very rural, very similar to Myanmar, to other parts of ASEAN. So Singapore, of course,
so in a
is
way,
very...
is in a way trying to develop very localized economy and not just focusing on huge commodity industry like what the government has always been focusing, which is the MNC. But at the same time, the MNC is getting the biggest pie in the ASEAN economic community. How much of this would actually be feasible for the social solidarity economy on the larger scale? Because at some point it will come into conflict with the business interests of the MNCs.
Yeah, I think that's there, because the bigger players have personnel, funding, they've got their advertising, and they have the political connections. And I think this is where public policy needs to be friendly to this section. And I think the governments around could look that if this is a localized economy, the products could be marketed at a more ASEAN level. So what are the facilities available for a village product to be marketed from one part of ASEAN to another? And this is where the governments need to facilitate this. Not subsidize it, but make it more feasible. If not, you can't compete with Coca-Cola or KFC or McDonald's because they are all over.
But also the GLC are
yes,
the ones covering a majority of the economic development, not just in countries like Malaysia and Singapore, but probably the rest of Southeast Asia.
I think you're right, and this is where the advocacy is for the state to create the space for this economy to flourish, because it's the people's economy. What is its net returns in the long run? It is moving local communities. It is getting a village, urban flat community into ASEAN framework, either through internet connections and others. I think if the state wants to, it can. Or it can disempower these communities to just be paid workers in a factory line. I think the solidarity movement or community-based economy movement is seeking to resist it. And that's where other players like World Fair Trade Organization that is sourcing these products across and then marketing them in Europe or in the West has created this new chain that is feasible and is commercially viable. And then the private sector jumps into the wagon to say they are fair trade or they have paid fair wages to workers, and then there is a competition, or whether these furniture is made from forests that is sustainably developed. And I think with the rise of the middle class in ASEAN and the rise of an aspirational society for greater human rights, for greater justice, for greater economic sharing across ASEAN, then I think this demands will be there, because you got the rich in Kuala Lumpur, you got the rich in Bangkok, you got the rich in Jakarta, you got the rich in Manila, the rich in Singapore. The mindset of us in ASEAN need to change.
Yes, that's true.
If not, if they're saying, okay, I'm going to get it real dirt cheap from, Cambodia or Laos, I can exploit them and labor is low, then I think we will not reach the level of being one community. It's an ideal, but public policy can facilitate this change.
So there's need to be not just a change of mindset, but also a change of public policy. But one thing, a possible problem or stumbling block would be the cost of production, because for MNC they have mastered a global supply chain where they can create something on a very cheaper scale based on the market of skill. But when it comes to very localized economy, how are they able to somehow compete with the same production when they don't have that supply chain in the beginning?
There is some level of supply chain at the local level, and I think you're right, and this is where at the national and regional level there needs to be the creation of this mechanism and the space, because if not they won't be able to compete. So if it is production of some item in country A that is community based, let's say if it is tea or some other product, it needs the distributional, the marketing, so the cash flow would be better than just, and I think these are things that need to be worked out. Because it's like almost a parallel economy coming, and eventually it can compete, because people then, it's a consumer that will determine whether they want this product or what kind of a product, and if it becomes fashionable and attitudes and values change, if there's support of the government, yes. And I think the threat is there because the forces of the market will try to, buy this out or produce it at a cheaper rate. But these are the challenges that we need to take up in our discussion at the ASEAN round table.
It's really a long way to go, but it's possible.
Yes, I think the models are there at the national level, and because ASEAN has now focused on a people-centered ASEAN, we can start discussing this across. So a village, let's say in Malaysia or a village in Myanmar, doesn't need to feel it's isolated and at the mercy of one section, but that we need to cut across. And this is where I think the big players like the Malaysian companies across ASEAN, the big CSR spenders, if they also adapt and facilitate this, it will not challenge their products. It will enhance their image, and their office can facilitate this. And hopefully some of the big players will come for our discussion as well.
Hopefully as well.
Hopefully.
But before we end the show, you mentioned earlier during the break that you actually produced a statement in conjunction with the ASEAN People's Forum on the social solidarity economy.
Yes, actually this is a statement coming out from the April 25th discussion, where we are highlighting 5 key points, many of which I have already highlighted here, but it will come out as a statement. We have circulated this among our key partners, and then we will issue it out to the government.
If you can summarize the key
Okay,
points.
I think the 5 points. One is that we are calling on the ASEAN governments to recognize that within ASEAN there are tremendous initiatives on the ground, which is enhancing quality of life, participation in local development, environmental conservation, these sort of things, people being empowered so to recognize this as not only a strategy but an initiative first. Second, we are calling ASEAN governments to recognize the launching of the ASEAN network for community-based enterprises, which will include government, private sector, and civil society in this, and possibly with Malaysia as the chair of ASEAN 2015, this could be recognized as one of the many networks in ASEAN. Third, we are calling for this South triangulation, partnership, cooperation and triangular cooperation, because all the different features like organic farming, SMIs, community-based agriculture, fair trade, could all be part of this. Fourthly, this cooperation between Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, to support Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, should be recognized as a key people-to-people initiative. And finally, for the governments to put community-based enterprises as one of their strategies and new target to achieve the global sustainable development goals. That this could be one of the strategy, because if not, they are looking at other strategies, but to consider community enterprises as one of the strategies along in the new sustainable development goals.
Malaysia is the chairman for this year's ASEAN Summit,
Yes.
which will be held next month. But is there any feedback, or did you approach the Malaysian government on this idea? I'm sure.
Yes, we our network had a meeting with the Committee of Permanent Representatives in Jakarta. We presented all these ideas to them. They have been supportive of it. we have also presented these ideas to the Malaysian ASEAN Secretariat here at Wisma Putra. They sent representatives to our pre-meeting and discussions, and so we are hopeful that this agenda will be taken forth, that our Prime Minister as chair, he has been very supportive of social entrepreneurship as a whole, with the Malaysian government setting a budget, getting young people involved. Malaysian government has enhanced more community-based programs like microcredit, cooperative development. So we are at the right footing because there's a lot of public sector funding to it. Although none of our activities are funded by we wish some money will come.
Probably
but
they are listening right now.
in due time. But we hope that the chair to ASEAN would say, look, these are good initiatives and we need to enhance this and build it under the theme of a people's ASEAN. And that's all that we are asking for.
With that, thank you very much, Dr. Denison.
Thank you for the opportunity.